Go, Emma.
Oh, believe it.
Love you. Bye.
It was adorable.
Thanks. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Yarn to Table. I'm Celeste, and this is a show about my knitting life. I am so excited to share with you a bunch of new finished objects, even though it's only been a month. I have been on a tear. I've been knitting a lot, and I've also been finishing up a lot of languishing whips. As I discussed last episode, I have a lot of languishing whips. Not a lot, but a lot for me, mainly because I've just come off a season of life where there was not nearly as much knitting as I would have liked there to have been. And I kind of kept starting a project thinking, oh, this will kind of get me back, get my mojo working again, and then it wouldn't be the right thing, and I'd kind of set it aside. And that just all was the product of new motherhood. I, knit a fair amount that first year, but then when my daughter got to be toddler age, it became more difficult to knit around her, and then I would be too tired to knit once she went to sleep, and and a lot of my brain power kind of getting zapped as well, which would make it more difficult to do certain types of projects and whatnot. But I'm back, baby. I'm back. She's 4.5. I kind of had a bit of a run of making for her 4th birthday. I made her a Intarsia unicorn sweater and a stuffed unicorn, and for Christmas, which was right after her birthday, I made her, leg warmers, and started making her some mittens, although I only finished one of them before winter was over. I'm just like back in it. I'm back in it. I'm knitting every day. I'm wanting to knit all the time. I have that desire back, and it feels so good because for so long this was just a huge part of my life every day, and it was definitely one of the main ways that I was feeling not like myself postpartum. I was dealing with a lot of body changes, and that obviously, when you're a garment knitter, made things difficult. I wasn't able to wear a lot of my favorite hand knits, and I struggled to know, what size to knit different things in, especially with, as I talked about before, pregnancy, then you have breastfeeding, and then knowing that I was planning a breast reduction, which I'm still planning, but have not gotten just yet. So yeah, so that part, that's still going on. That's still making things a little difficult. But anyway, postpartum, it's like you're dealing with identity changes, body changes, and then having this rift in my knitting life was a lot, and it's feeling like I'm stepping into a new era, and yeah, it's feeling really good. It's good to have myself back. So yeah, the first thing I have to share with you is what I'm wearing. You probably can identify it because it is the most popular knitting pattern in the world. This is the ranunculus. And I knit this up at a summer weight with a linen cotton blend chainette, fingering weight held double, from Knit Picks. It's called Lindy Chain, which was quite enjoyable as far as plant fibers go for me. I love to wear plant fibers in the summer, but I just historically have not loved knitting with them. And the thing about the Lindy Chain or Kestrel by Quince & Co., which is my other favorite summer weight, that's 100% linen, Aran weight, but also a chainette. The chainette gives it a little bit of stretch, and the thing that I just hate about linen and cotton is no stretch. So yeah, the chainette gave it enough of that stretch. It's it wasn't as enjoyable as knitting with wool, but it was definitely better. So yeah, I think I'm finally kind of figuring out, okay, I need some wool in the blend, or I need a chainette, or these are some things to make summer weight yarn a little bit more tolerable for me. And that's good because I want to knit summer garments for myself and for my loved ones. Like, I love, love, love wool, and I will wear wool in the summer, but I also live in an incredibly humid climate here in a river valley, and it gets miserable some days in the summer. And this, which is so light and airy and breezy and lovely, is exactly what I want to wear. So I love how this turned out. I knit up a couple swatches to get gauge. I had bought this yarn many moons ago, probably in 2016. And I had the idea that I was going to knit this like camisole with it that I never ended up knitting. I was going to knit that at a fingering weight gauge. And I did swatch with it, I guess, because when I found the yarn going through my stash recently, it was with a gauge swatch. And you know, you would think, well, what am I going to do with this gauge swatch? Because I don't know what size needle I knitted up on. But actually, past me was much more organized than current me. She had it together, and I did the thing where I like tied the knots. I tied like 3 knots for a size US 3 needle. Brilliant. So when I found that, I was like, oh, I'm loving this. But then I remembered that I wanted to knit it double, so I'd need a new gauge swatch anyway. So the pattern recommended a US size 10. I'm a loose knitter, so I first swatched with an 8 because I usually have to size down at least 1 needle size, and given that we were working with such a big needle, I thought, let me try 2 sizes down. So I swatched with the US size 8 and measured, and that was quite small. So I went ahead and tried at the recommended, the 10, and that measured perfectly to the pattern. So I did end up knitting this on the US 10s, and because it was such a huge gauge, I mean, it went so fast. I knit it in 5 days, I think, but if I had really been like dedicating time, like not, you know, working and doing other things on those days, I mean, I could have done like 2, like maybe 2.5 days. It took 3 days to dry on the blocking mat. So I spent almost as much time waiting for it to be ready to wear. And in fact, today is my first day wearing it and I love it. But yeah, the ranunculus pattern has tons of hype for it. People get excited about the fact that, you know, you can knit it in any kind of yarn and it just have looser, tighter gauge or more or less ease or whatever. And that this whole range of sizes and all this kind of thing. And my unpopular opinion is that it's a little overhyped. Because first of all, you can take any pattern and knit like at a looser gauge, a finer gauge yarn on big needles and have a more open gauge. And as long as you're getting gauge, knit that pattern and end up with the same schematics, you know? So it's like the pattern didn't like invent that and doesn't particularly give that much information, honestly, about how to do it. Like, I think there's a ton of pictures of ranunculuses worn at different, you know, amounts of ease that were knit on different needles and all this different stuff. And I think a lot of people see those and they kind of want like a specific look that they see someone do. And the truth is that like there's so many variables, and if you don't know like the exact pattern notes from like that person's, you might go and try to recreate it and it's not going to look exactly like that. So there is a huge amount of variety that people have done with this pattern, and I think that's like a really fun thing about it, to look and see all of that. But the pattern itself, like I feel like I'm not, look, the ranunculus is the most popular pattern on Ravelry, so it's not going to affect it if I talk a little smack. So with, you know, all good intentions, just in all honesty, I hate to like talk negatively about like an independent designer's pattern, but the fact is that I just feel like it's so hyped, and I kind of feel like I want to offset that a little bit by just sort of stating some facts and being a little bit like, let's be reasonable here. The yoke is exactly the same at every size in this pattern. And then the raglan increases under the yoke are the only place where the pattern has been graded, which is not really grading a pattern. Like, proportionally, this yoke is going to look different on an extra small, or like the first size versus the last size. It's going to be a larger portion of the sweater on that first size and a smaller portion on the last size. So it's good that they like made it available to have larger circumferences at the bust, but they didn't actually grade the yoke itself. So that's an issue that I feel like, again, if the big story of the pattern is, look how it's available in all these sizes and you can knit it at any gauge, but the actual pattern itself is not putting in just the basic work to grade the yoke, which like most yoked patterns do. Like if you buy a colorwork yoke pattern today and you look to the chart, there's going to be a different version of that chart for different sizes, because they're going to build in the increases to the yoke itself and not just under the yoke, so that proportionally that design is going to look as similar as possible on the sample and in every size. That's what grading is. So anyway, that's my beef with the ranunculus, a pattern that I think is overhyped and nonetheless I use to make a product that I absolutely love, and I'm going to get a ton of wear out of. My other thing is just personally, I didn't enjoy the process of like the cable-y type things that are on here. You do this thing where you like have to go between stitches and pull a loop through, and then you have to resolve it on the next round by knitting that loop together. And it's just a little bit uncomfortable and finicky. It's not difficult, it's just not fun. Like, that's not a fun thing to do. And one of the reasons I chose this pattern was that I had heard it was really fun to knit. I'd heard it went really fast and it was really fun. And I was looking for something I could knit up super quickly, because I had this yarn in my stash that I decided I wanted to use for one last sort of summer garment for myself before I transitioned into knitting fall stuff, but specifically a Halloween sweater I want to knit for my daughter that I've told myself I need to get started on come August. So I was like, I only have, you know, the end of July left. Like, I need something that's going to knit up fast. And yeah, so with the huge gauge and with people saying it was really fun, I kind of chose it for that reason. And it definitely did knit up fast, like absolutely. Fun is very relative. It's very subjective to the person and what they find fun. So I didn't find this fun. And I like cables. Cables are my favorite thing. This was not a cable. It kind of looks like a cable. Hated it. So those are my mixed thoughts on the ranunculus, a pattern I love. Oh, I mean, a product a pattern I have beef with, a product I love. Also, I harvested the swatch, the original swatch that I mentioned, to finish this bind off. That's how much of the yarn I used. And it just ends, I'm gonna insert a photo because if I stand up, it's just not gonna be in focus, but it ends at the perfect height. And I really had I wasn't trying it on. I didn't know what was gonna happen when I blocked it. Like, my I was kind of thinking I needed to knit it longer than this. I was a little worried it was going to be too short. So my entire plan was just to use all of the yarn and just see what happened. And it turned out perfectly. So I guess, I don't know, luck was on my side. I didn't do the work to make it the perfect length, but it ended up the perfect length and I'm happy. So let me show you my other finished objects. I have so much to talk about today. It's gonna be crazy. Okay, this is my Skagen Tee, which I don't believe I had even started when we last spoke, but I knit this out for myself in about a week. It, much like the ranunculus, did not take much time at all, and a big part of that is I'm on this kick of monogamous knitting right now because I'm like trying to like finish up whips or like get certain things done that will be good for the climate and then like move on to fall. Like I kind of have this like, I'm in this place where I'm really enjoying like this regimented monogamous rhythm with knitting. And the thing that's so great about monogamous knitting is not only do you speed through projects faster because it's the only thing you're working on, so it just feels faster, but actually I think it is faster because I think I knit more when I'm knitting monogamously because I'm anxious to finish so that I can cast on something new. I get excited about working on the new thing and I don't let myself do it. So then that motivates me to knit a little bit more every time and finish things faster. So, you know, I go in phases. I typically am not a monogamous knitter, but at this moment I am loving it. And I don't know how long it's gonna last, but I'm really loving it. So I knit on this monogamously for a week. I use drops cotton merino, and yeah, I basically wanted a nice little quick knit summer garment for myself, much like with the ranunculus, and much like with the ranunculus, I kind of don't recommend the pattern, just because it really did not give as much information as you would like. In fact, it kind of gave like wrong information, and when it came to like the raglan decreases, for example, it did them with the centered double decrease, which is very pretty. It creates this really nice look, which I love, but the instructions said to put a stitch marker there, and if you know anything about a centered double decrease, you really can't do it with a stitch marker because you would just keep knitting into the stitch marker. Like you're expanding from that point out, so every single round you would have to remove the stitch marker and move it over again. So I just didn't use the stitch markers and I read my knitting to do it, which worked fine. But the instructions told you to put a stitch marker and didn't mention anything about how you would need to reorient it every time. Like the instructions just basically, like it read as if it hadn't been like test knit. It hadn't, someone just sort of had like, in theory, you use this stitch marker, but the designer themselves hadn't used one and didn't realize that you kind of couldn't. So that kind of thing like bothers me in a paid for pattern when it's a very basic design, you know, because you get into it and you're like, I could have bought a like basic raglan cardigan from anyone. And that's on me to some extent because I bought this one like, you know, just based on like, I don't know, randomly coming across it. And I could have noticed that there weren't that many projects made and that half of them had noted that the pattern was confusing. If I took any time to really compare patterns and decide what would be the best one, I could have just chosen something similar to this and avoided the whole thing. But it worked out fine. I feel like I'm an experienced enough knitter that I come across stuff like that and it's not like devastating to my experience because I can like read my knitting to do the decreases, or like I'm familiar enough with, you know, certain things. This also did not hold your hand at all on the button band, and I'm not super experienced with button bands because I'm much more of a pullover wearer than a cardigan wearer. So I just haven't done many of them. So what I did was I went to a tutorial, which I'll link in the doobly-doo because it was, mwah. I think I found a couple tutorials based on picking up stitches and button bands. I think there were like 2 that I referenced. That were all about just like calculating the rate of pickup based on measuring your gauge so that you get the exact right button band, and just had a few little tricks and tips in there to make it end up just so nice and neat. I just really, I'm really proud of this button band, and I could not have done it without those tutorials. They were incredibly helpful. So I'm gonna link those. Don't recommend the pattern, recommend those tutorials for sure. And the yarn was not bad. This was the cotton merino, which I mentioned last week. I don't think I'd ever knit with that mix before. And it did add a little bit of stretch. I mean, it was not bad. It wasn't my favorite thing to knit with. It wasn't as bad as pure cotton. The buttons, boy, was this a saga. I looked all over the place trying to find the perfect buttons. I went to local yarn stores and craft stores and looked online. I looked at Etsy, I looked at Amazon. It was bizarre how difficult it was for me to find these buttons that are pretty simple, but I just kind of had in my head what I wanted. And yeah, once I got it in my head, I couldn't compromise. So I did find them, and I loved them. And I knit them on with the like little parallel stitching, which is kind of different. I don't really know how I feel about it, but kind of just wanted to mix it up. So yeah. The other finished object garment I have is my throwover. Oh my goodness. Now talk about yarn I enjoyed knitting with. This Biche Le Gros lamb's wool. It is so beautiful. If you just look at the like subtleties of little nubs and little heathering and just different colors in there. It's so beautiful. I will be checking out their yarn again. It is very rustic. It is borderline not next to skin, depending on your preference. Like, I can wear it next to skin, but it's not the most comfortable next to skin. But I love it. And then obviously the Spin Cycle Dream State, which is what the pattern was designed for. Let me try to focus on that so you can see. It's absolutely beautiful. Colors. Just gorgeous. I think I just had like a sleeve or something left to do when I showed you this. I can't remember. But yeah, I'm excited to wear this in the fall. I will say I feel like I'm repeating myself, so I don't want to like just constantly talk about this whole like weight loss breast reduction thing, but it is like a big thing that's happening in my knitting life right now. And so I'm kind of knitting everything a little too small, which makes it not like as exciting when you finish, because like this is fitting me, like it fits, but it's like a little tighter than I would prefer. And that's fine because it'll fit how I prefer, like, you know, 6 months from now when I get a breast reduction, and then like for the rest of my life, hopefully. But yeah, so that's like a little bit of a, it's been a tiny bit of a downer in my knitting life of like finally finishing these garments for myself when I haven't finished a garment for myself since I was pregnant with my 4.5-year-old daughter. No, that's not true. Since she was a baby, I knit myself a couple summer garments in 2020. But yeah, I haven't finished a sweater for myself since I was pregnant. And when you finish it and you put it on and it just doesn't feel perfectly comfy and cozy with that perfect amount of ease, because it's a little small, it's like I don't regret my choice. I feel like it was still a good choice. But putting this on today and having it feel like it fit perfectly because it is so much ease, that was doing it for me. That did it for me in a way that the throwover kind of didn't perfectly. So I love this. Okay, so then I also finished up my socky socks, which I showed you last time. And I did something crazy this time and I actually blocked them. I don't think I've blocked socks I wasn't giving as a gift, probably ever. But you can see, actually blocked. Look at that. Look at those beauties. This stitch pattern is listed on my Ravelry page. I think I forgot to say, it's listed in the doobly-doo, but I'm Celeste Full on Ravelry and Instagram. I keep very up-to-date project pages on Ravelry with all the info that I usually don't spend my time saying here, like colorway names and stuff like that, that I will forget what they are, say the wrong thing, or say it wrong, or, you know, whatever. I kind of would rather just use our time here, like, talking about my personal experience with it, and then if you want to know all the deets because you want to use this yarn or this pattern yourself, you can just go and find it on Ravelry. So that's where to go. But this stitch pattern I put there, it's a simple 8-row repeat across 4 stitches, I want to say. That becomes pretty intuitive after 1 or 2 repeats. Slip stitch, heel flap, and gusset. You know, I kind of talked all the details when I talked about this last time, I think. But yeah, I finished them up. I love them. I love the yarn. And I'm going to cast on a new sock sometime here soon with some more Retrosaria. In fact, some more Retrosaria La Bien-Aimée, which is what this is. But for my husband, because it's been quite a while since I've knit him some socks, and my hand knit socks are his favorite. He genuinely wears them every single day that he can. And yeah, in a perfect world, I would knit him enough socks that he wouldn't have to buy any more socks because he adores them. So I really need to get him another pair because, yeah, he only has like 4 pair. So I would love for him to have like 20. Maybe I need to just only knit socks for him for a while. Just kind of train him out. I don't know. Not like that would be the only thing I would knit, but like the only socks I would knit, perhaps. Although I'm also kind of on this kick where I've been watching those twins who knit. I've been rediscovering some knitting new knitting, not rediscovering. I've been discovering some new knitting podcasts and YouTube channels, new to me. Because a lot of the stuff I used to watch is gone. You know, it doesn't update anymore because it's been a while, guys. It's been a while since I was watching a ton of knitting content. So I've been like discovering like, what are the new channels to watch, you know? And Those Twins Who Knit is one of the ones that I've been enjoying. And they do a lot of pattern socks. They do a lot of like actually buying a sock pattern and then like actually following the pattern. Wild, I know. Whereas I have not done that for a very long time. I just kind of like do vanilla, or I sort of like add a texture to my typical sock recipe, which is great. I mean, it's like, I tend to think of socks as more of like a mindless on the go project, but they've been knitting so many interesting, cute socks and like trying new ways of doing like Fleagle heels or whatever they're called, and like things that I haven't really done. And I'm kind of like, I don't know, I feel like I might enjoy sort of making a sock project into a real project where I learn something new and follow a pattern. Because they do that all the time and it makes it look fun. So I've kind of been wanting to do stuff like that for myself, because Ryan doesn't like textured socks at all. But I also want to kind of like go all in and knit for Ryan. So we'll see what becomes of where my sock knitting takes me. My general rule is to my general like habit is to have a pair of socks going. Like, but I've been on this monogamous kick, so I haven't started new ones. And I kind of feel like socks should be the exception to the monogamous knitting. But at the same time, I'm like just not wanting to start any at this moment because I'm just too excited about the bigger projects. So I don't know. Okay, next thing. You will know this is a Sophie scarf if you haven't been living under a rock for a few years. I was living under a rock, so I didn't know about the Sophie scarves. But I went ahead and made one when I was watching kind of my knitting podcasts and realized that everyone had been doing this. I had to jump on the trend that was like a year old. So there you have it. This was really fun because, first of all, I'm kind of feeling color right now in like a new weird way. I'm enjoying color. I mean, look, it matches my nails for one thing. I'm having a bit of a blue moment. I'm also having a bit of a color moment. And a Sophie scarf seemed like a really fun project to kind of do a bit of color with, and also to do a bit of 100% cashmere with, because that is what this is. This is it's that cashmere brand you always hear about. Something classic. It's on Ravelry, I'm sorry. Anyway. Cardiff. Anyway, I've been thinking that when I finally get my breast reduction, and I feel like I know what my body is gonna kind of be, hopefully for some manageable amount of time, and not the sort of like roller coaster it's been in the last 5 years. I really think I'm finally wanting to knit myself that 100% cashmere sweater that I've always dreamed of making. I own a few store-bought cashmere sweaters. I adore them. I just would like one that I made for myself. Obviously, I want to get that process exactly right because it would be a huge investment for the yarn. So I want to like pick the right pattern and make sure that I like knit it in the right size, and like this is the whole like waiting until I've had the breast reduction thing to like knit it for the size that body's going to be, and all this. And part of that process is I wanted to sample some different cashmeres. So I got this skein on like Poshmark or something, which was nice because I fell in love with this color, and then they were sold out everywhere, and then I found it on Poshmark, and on Poshmark it was marked down so that it was basically like getting free shipping because it was like reduced the amount that was the shipping. So that ruled. And then I also have been wanting to try knitting for Olive, you know, because that's the hot new yarn, one of the hot new yarns. And they have such incredible colors. So of course I went with black just to be annoying. But yeah, this is their compatible cashmere, and I'm going to do another Sophie scarf holding that with the merino. because I also wanted to kind of like sample what would it be like to do a blend. And then I also want to sample some more like knitting mohair and angora and alpaca held with a merino. I've kind of gotten on this kick now where I'm like interested in softer yarns. I'm such a woolly wool person usually, but I've gotten like to where I'm like kind of interested in figuring out what kind of soft stuff I like. So in the past, I've been a little burned because I'll buy something like a merino silk blend and that's not stretchy at all. It doesn't have any wool. And then I hate working with it. I think I'm gonna like it because in the skein it's so soft. And then I try it and I cannot. Like I had this beautiful alpaca silk blend from La Bien-Aimée. I knit half a shawl in it. This was years ago. Abandoned the project, could not go any further, absolutely hated using it. And ended up, you know, donating these beautiful skeins after they sat in my stash for a few years because I went, like, they're gorgeous, they feel incredible, they were extremely expensive, they're hand-dyed friggin' alpaca silk from Paris, but I cannot, like, I hate them. I don't like the way they feel when I'm knitting. So kind of went into this like woolly wool place, and woolly wool is lovely for many types of projects, but it's typically not the softest. And there's something nice about something really soft. So, you know, now I'm kind of going, well, everybody is knitting these like petite knit, like mohair sweaters and stuff. And like, I kind of want to experiment a bit more with mixing in these yarns that are softer fibers with wool and seeing how I like that. Now, the cashmere, the 100% cashmere from Cardiff is also a chainette. So much like the Lindy chain that I knit this out of, it has a bit of a stretch. So it was a joy to work with. It was like working with the softest wool. Like it felt kind of like wool. I loved it. So that yarn tasting was successful in teaching me that this is something I could absolutely enjoy knitting a whole sweater out of if I decide to invest and do that, probably next year or something like that. I don't know. I don't know when exactly I'm getting this reduction, and I won't go into it. But you know, hopefully, dear God, sometime soon. And then I'm gonna taste these together. This cashmere is not a chainette, so it. Hello. Come on. But it still has a bit of give to it. Not that much, but certainly more than cotton. So I didn't really know that was something to expect with 100% cashmere, that it could have any, and maybe it's about the way it's been spun. I don't really know how they did it, but it does have a little bit of a stretch to it. Even though this is not a chainette. I'm gonna sample those together. And yeah, and then I'll get into some talk about some mohair in my stash enhancement. But first, is that everything I knit? Yeah, first whip. So my whip, which is very close to being an FO. It is about 2 inches away from being an FO. Here's my Jupiter. I'm knitting it inside out because I knit all my color work inside out. I started with always doing it for small circumference color work, and now I just do it for everything. And I love it because it keeps the floats from getting too tight. But but this is what it looks like on the inside. And when I say I knit it inside out, I'm on the ribbing, so this isn't gonna show as easily for you, but basically this would be your perspective if you're me. You're holding it like this. So your excess is in the front instead of in the back, and you're seeing the inside and you're knitting along. Yeah, because I started this years ago. So I started this in August of 2021, which is 3 years ago. And I set it aside for quite a long time. That was like right before I hit my major slump. And I think what I did was I mostly like knit the yoke and the body, and then I decided to do this alteration of making full-length sleeves, which meant I had to like go to the charts and chart sleeves myself based on the designs that were included in the pattern. So I used a combination of body and yoke charts to figure out how I wanted my sleeves, and that just took like a slightly more brain power than I had at the moment when I was burned down from like COVID and 2 solid years of working from home with a small child and no help. So that kind of like put it into hibernation. Then I sort of stopped knitting much entirely, and when I did want to pick something up, it wasn't this. But I love this pattern. I've been wanting to wear it. I've been enjoying knitting on it, and I'm super psyched to finally be finishing it up. I picked up this sleeve maybe earlier in the spring, and then when I, kind of got through all this stuff, I was expecting to move straight into my next plan, which is my daughter's Halloween sweater, but I'm still waiting on some yarn. So, and technically I told myself I had through July to do whatever I wanted, and I wouldn't start that until August. So when I finished the ranunculus, a couple days ago, I thought I can knit this sleeve in like the last week of July. Let's do it. Let's finish up another languishing whip. And yeah, that it feels incredible. I now only have one, because I went back and I found some things that I wasn't going to finish and frog them, and now I only have one proper languishing whip from the before times, which is my Daydreamer that I knit almost all of the body while I was pregnant, and then set it aside when I had like a month left of my pregnancy because I wanted to knock out a couple more baby knits. And I thought I was gonna pick it right back up again. But then, postpartum depression and mom brain and COVID all happened, and then I gained a bunch of weight and I wasn't sure it would even fit, and it just kind of sat there. And then I thought I might pick it back up, but it's a pretty complicated pattern, so it's really gonna take me sitting with it for a minute to get back in the rhythm. But yeah, that's the last thing. I'm gonna be digging that sucker out probably come fall. Fingers crossed, and doing those sleeves, and then I will have another whip done. But yeah, it's my only languishing before times whip now that this one is done, and that feels amazing. So yeah, I just have the rest of this cuff, weave in my ends, block it. Probably gonna do all of that later today. Yeah, feels good. And then I still have a couple more days until August, although I also do need to put in some work doing the maths, because it turns out I'm creating the pattern from scratch for my daughter's sweater, which was not my plan, but that's where we're at. And I guess it's time to talk about that. Yeah, so knitting plans on the horizon, as I used to call this segment. Okay, I wanted to knit her a Halloween heart, which is a basic DK weight colorwork yoke sweater where you kind of can choose different motifs and mix and match them. I told her about it, and she kind of started making requests. And it started to become more complicated than I could, more motifs than I could fit in just the yoke. And it became an all over colorwork sweater with motifs that were not in the Halloween heart pattern. And then also I kind of decided it just makes sense for me to like, I was gonna sort of like just add things to the Halloween heart, but now I'm like, I'm just gonna go from scratch and do my own thing, because I had made another Colorwork Kids yoked sweater by this designer a few years ago for Coco, and the yoke did not fit her super well. I made her this really cute Last Unicorn sweater is what it's called. But I noticed as I was looking at the Halloween heart, I was like, these charts are like 20 rows of DK weight color work on a tiny little toddler frame. And the chart is straight up and down. It's not, there are not increases built into the motifs. And I think that's because her thought process is, here are the motifs, mix and match them as you please. So she didn't want to build the increases into them. She puts the increases between them. But the larger charts, as I said, are like 20 rows. So you kind of have a compromise there where, you know, she's compromising the best possible fit of the yoke in order to give you like more flexibility with the pattern, which is fine. That's how, you know, she wanted to make that pattern and how plenty of people have enjoyed it. But for specifically what I'm doing, I don't really need to follow her pattern. I can go do the math and find the best way to do a basic yoked sweater for Coco and figure out how I want to do my increases and incorporate them into my own charts and just make my own charts from scratch. Since I'm already going to the trouble of making all of these additional motifs that Coco has requested. So again, like this wasn't my plan. I wasn't going to design an entire all over colorwork Halloween sweater for Coco. I was just gonna make a Halloween heart. But as I started to get further and further into advanced modifications, I thought, screw it, let me just make my own sweater. So I purchased the Halloween heart. Enjoy your money, designer. Mine will be heavily inspired by hers. My ghost that I'm incorporating is very similar to her ghost. So it is not my sweater by any means. That's not my idea. But I'm basically designing it and making it my own, and it's very far from what the original was. Now, as I said, I need to grab my books and kind of do my math and figure out what I'm doing. I'm gonna figure out what gauge I want to knit based on that. I think I'm gonna do a DK weight, but all my yarn is fingering, so I could double it and do DK, or if I decide I would rather do it fingering, I can do that. Now that is going to take forever to knit, and so I kind of don't want to, but it's all going to depend on whether it feels like the motifs I want to make are going to fit with the maths and her body, what weight of yarn is going to make sense. So I'll figure that out. But the body, her favorite color is purple. The body is going to be this absolutely stunning, which is actually cooler toned in real life. It's looking warmer toned on camera. Woolly Mammoth Fiber Co. Naturally dyed. Emma, this is probably my favorite like yarn company. If forced to name one at gunpoint at this moment. Emma in Northern Ireland, lovely, lovely human being. She makes lovely videos, a lovely podcast. She makes extra stuff for her Patreon, which I am subscribed to because I adore her work that much. And this year she even has a dye garden off her beautiful studio in beautiful Northern Ireland, where she is growing plants to dye with. All of her dyeing is 100% natural. The fact that she got this shade of purple from natural dyeing, I don't even know. Like, I imagine it involved cochineal and over dyeing with blue, but I don't know enough to, know, and she doesn't like give away her recipes, obviously, trade secrets. But I literally have never seen a color anything like this on like naturally dyed yarn. It's so gorgeous. And then she does all natural bases as well. So like this is a 50% Cheviot, 50% BFL. Sourced, spun, and made in the UK. This colorway is called Wildflower Dark, by the way. She does Wildflower, is one of her more regular colorways that's like a lighter purple, but Coco really likes dark purple. And I mean, the base is gorgeous. This is her natural sock, so it's a high twist, but there's no nylon or anything, so it's perfect for the kind of socks I like. It is delicious. It reminds me, it is quite similar, although a higher twist, I would think, to the Monde. Oh, I've been saying it wrong all these years. It's Mondi. The Mondi, the Retrosaria Mondi. This is my leftovers from my socks, which I'm hoping to use in the color work, along with more Retrosaria Mondi in undyed and black, which I have coming in the mail. So I think they're going to pair beautifully together. And yeah, whether I double up or not remains to be seen. My plan, here I have all these. Oh, and I don't know if I'm going to have enough of this. So I'm also considering, this is the, what's it called? This is Retrosaria. This is the Retrosaria Vovo, which is like the Mondi, but it's DK weight. And it's what my Jupiter is, what I'm knitting my Jupiter out of. This is the last little bit of that rusty color from it. So I haven't weighed these yet, but if this one is any more than this, I might potentially use it instead. Or I might have to use both. I might do one for the pumpkins and one for the fleas. I'm getting ahead of myself. I did a drawing on my iPad of what I want this to be. Coco requested witches on brooms and it was very, very adamant about there being witches on brooms, which is where I started with buying graph paper and creating all of these motifs. Here you can see my attempt over and over again to make something that looked like a witch. I think I still need to swatch with it to make sure it definitely looks like a witch. But yeah, so my plan is to have witches, ghosts, pumpkins, and then in between I'm going to have some little bats. And then I'm going to have fleas or hearts with the white and the orange. Or I might do tiny little skulls with the white in between the larger motifs. Slightly remains to be seen. Some stuff I need to swatch to know. And then I also, as I said, need to like do all the calculations and figure out actually how much space, how big my canvas is. But yeah, so that's the plan. I'm going to be starting on that soon. In my opinion, August 1st is the first day of fall. And so the fall knitting will begin in about a week. But yeah, this is going to be fun. It's a big project. It's more involved than I planned. It's, in all honesty, not what I want to cast on next. I want to cast on something else for myself, selfishly. Because here's the thing. In the last few years, where I've done a little knitting here and there, I looked on Ravelry, the last 16 projects I finished up until I finished that throwover were all for my daughter. I knit her mittens, she outgrew them, I knit her more mittens, you know, socks, a sweater, a purple unicorn sweater, a different purple unicorn sweater 2 years later because she was too big for it, you know, a summer weight top, a different summer weight top when she outgrew that one, several stuffies, Christmas stocking, did I say that? Hats. I enjoyed it. Those are what I wanted to knit in those few years when that was all those smaller bits and things where it felt like there was a reason to get it done. I could set aside these sweaters and be like, I'll get to it later. But when you're knitting something for someone who's growing fast, you're motivated to get it out, right? So all of that was my choice and I enjoyed it, and that was the season I was in. But up until this throwover, it was 16 in a row for her. Not any socks for Ryan, not anything for anybody else, certainly not anything for me, not anything for the house, nothing. 16 items in a row for her. And now I am feeling like I want to knit all the garments in the world for me, and like I want to knit all the socks in the world for Ryan. But I also wanted to like pop out a cute little Halloween heart. No big deal. Just, you know, it would take me a couple weeks. Let's just do that. And then it has snowballed into what it is. So I'm slightly dreading the amount of work this is going to be, particularly the pre-work to get started. I'm sure once I get going, it'll be fun and I'll probably zoom through it. But it's still what I want to do. I'm kind of psyched about designing it myself. It was fun to draw it. When I showed her the picture, she lost her damn mind. She was so happy. And like, it makes me so happy when she gets excited about things that I make for her. There's nothing better. There's nothing better in the world than that. So that's happening. And in fact, I've also ordered yarn for another sweater I want to make for her later in the year as well. So we'll talk about that maybe in the next episode. But yeah, she's still one of my favorite people to knit for, even though I felt like I was maybe gonna take a little bit of a break from the cocoa knits. They're coming back. They're coming back. Okay, I want to talk about another plan / acquisition, and then I want to share something pretty special, which is, just to tease you, my new knitting journal. Okay, so I have a tale of woe from the time when I was not knitting as much and my mojo was one of my languishing whips that I decided to frog when I cleaned out my, I recently cleaned out my stash a week ago. Got rid of an entire garbage bag full of things. They're getting split between two of my friends who want them. But beautiful yarn. I put this on my Instagram. It's all in my knitting, one of my knitting highlight reels, if you want to see a bit of it. But yeah, I had some yarn that was never going to get used because it's like, it was singles, which I bought back when I thought I liked singles, or it was a gift that wasn't really my style, or it was, you know, whatever. And a lot of scraps that aren't going to get used either. I'm not the most use up all your scraps type person. I'm more of a donate my scraps type person and move on to what I'm really excited about. I'm not the most virtuous knitter always. It started really pouring. I don't know if you can hear it. The light has probably gotten bad. I feel like it's looking really orange on the monitor. Anyway, so I cleaned out my whole stash. That felt incredible. Got rid of a bunch of stuff and actually logged accurately my entire stash on Ravelry, which I had done many years ago, but it had gotten like out of date. Things had come in that hadn't gotten logged and things had gone out that hadn't gotten removed. So my Ravelry stash is now like actually reflective of my stash, which is cool because when I'm on the go, if I go to like yarn festival, I want to go to the wool gathering in September, that kind of thing, I can check in and I kind of like know what I have. I know exactly what it is, and it really just helps me plan. Or even sometimes I, you know, will be away from home somewhere and I'm bored and I kind of like want to look at patterns and start thinking about, ooh, what could I do with that yarn that's in my stash? And like having it all there on Ravelry where I can access it and not have to physically be going through my stash is nice. So that was great. But where was I going with this? I cleaned out my stash. I cleaned out my whips. I frogged some things. Some of the yarn I frogged I put back in my stash to, you know, figure out, like I have a whole bunch of Quince & Co. Finch in gray that like I will figure out something I want to do with it at some point. I'm sure it's not enough for a sweater, but probably enough for a sweater for Coco, but I don't think she'd want to wear gray. Anyway, you know, and then other things I frogged and I got rid of the yarn. But one thing I frogged, and I have tons and tons of now, is this, and this is one that, you know, that didn't even get kicked up. But okay, so when I was back in my, slump, every 6 months or so, I would decide on a project that I really felt like knitting that was going to solve the slump for me. It was gonna do it. That was gonna be the one. And at one point it was, I'm going to re-knit my, don't know what that sweater was called, but I did this beautiful Brooklyn tweed sweater that was one of my most worn knits, Kirigami. It's one of my most worn knits. I did it out of Brooklyn tweed, arbor in the color Ventnor, which is what this is. And I knit it at too loose of a gauge because I didn't know that much back then, so it pilled a little and just wasn't as dense as I would like it to be. So it wasn't perfect. I mean, nothing ever is, but anyway, I love that sweater. I wore it a ton. At this point, I had gained enough weight that it was like, that was one of the things I wasn't wearing, and I thought, I want to knit something for myself, for my today body. I want to knit myself a garment, and what I honestly want more than anything is to redo the Kirigami and do it properly this time. Do it in my current size and do it at the right gauge. And you know, because like I love that sweater, but I want to have it again. I want to wear it again, and this time I'm going to do it even better. So I bought the yarn. I started it. I knit damn near the whole body up to the yoke. It's bottom up. Realized at some point that I was like 2 inches into a new dye lot. You can see very clearly the difference here between these. So I had been knitting with this, and then all of a sudden I was knitting with this darker dye lot. And that really took the steam out of my sails, because obviously I knew I was going to have to rip back those 2 inches, but I also thought, oh God, I got these yarns from different dye lots. I don't know how that happened or how I didn't notice it. Now I'm going to have to alternate skeins, and that is going to take all the joy out of this process because I don't want to do that. So I just set it aside and let it languish for the next, I don't know, year or two. So that was one of the things I went to when I was cleaning out my stash and cleaning out my languishing whips, and I realized that actually I have a whole sweater's quantity that's all the same dye lot. Some of them were caked up, so I can't be for certain, but when I went through, what I realized is that it's very, very noticeable, even just holding the skeins together, which means that even among the ones that are caked up, I feel pretty confident in separating them and knowing which one is from dye lot A and which is from dye lot B. They're mostly the dye lot A. There's just a handful of them from this. So what probably happened was that I had these in my stash for something else and then bought the ones for the sweater and didn't realize that they got mixed together. Point being that I do have this whole beautiful sweater's quantity of the arbor that I don't have to rotate, I don't have to alternate skeins with, and so I would enjoy using it for something. And now what I'm feeling I want to use it for is like a really basic, soft, holding it with mohair, like sort of a like petite knit drop shoulder type sweater with a folded over collar, like probably the Stockholm but maybe the Oslo, they are almost identical. I think the gauge is slightly different, or the amount of positive V's, or both. But I'm gonna knit up swatches and then decide based on that what pattern to use. But yeah, so I ordered some mohair, just knit picks, that I think will match with it nicely. I wanted to try the Issier mohair that everyone raves about, but they did not have a red that matched, or they didn't have a red that matched in stock or something like that. And so then I kind of went looking around for alternatives, and I really did want to try like a different mohair, like one of the trendy mohairs that people like. But honestly, Knit Picks is quite soft. I've never had any complaints about it. And when I saw that the red from Knit Picks was on like mega sale, plus it was already a Knit Picks price, I was like, I cannot justify. Also, I'm like on a bit of a yarn buying freeze, other than certain exceptions, like the Mondi for Cocoa Sweater and the other yarn that I bought for another sweater for Coco that's coming, but I'm trying not to buy too much. Anyway, the point is that I wasn't meant to even be buying new yarn, because the whole thing here was like knitting from stash, finishing up the whips, like being very virtuous, as I did with this, knitting from stash, very, very old yarn, just being a good girl. So if I was gonna let myself buy a whole bunch of mohair, buying it on sale from Knit Picks was definitely the move. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see when it happens, but it's happening soon-ish. But what's definitely gonna happen soon is swatching, because here is another way that I like to trick my brain and motivate myself, like with the monogamous knitting, is when I wanna cast on something, but for whatever reason, it's like not the time, that's when you swatch. That's when you swatch, because if you're excited, then you do the swatch, you know, you're like, oh, I'm getting to work with this yarn and think about it and kind of start the project, but without really starting the project, and it gets you to swatch. And it gets you to not start the project ahead of yourself. It's really great. It works for me anyway. Okay, I'm show you this, it's so pretty. This is my knitting journal. I have for years thought about making something like this, and I don't know exactly why I never did. It felt like extra, it felt like something that would be nice to have, but maybe it felt sort of like work to make it. And I think I've had, I don't know, I think I just, right now, because I'm finishing these projects that, you know, and it's been so long since I've knit a lot like this, it's like everything feels like it should be a celebration. And this is such a nice tribute and celebration to my knits. And I really am doing it in a simple way. I'm like, taping the yarn in is important to me because it gives it this tactile, lovely aspect. So I just got all this washi tape. I'm using that, and then I'm printing these photos. I have this little Instax printer, so you can actually take your digital photos that you took on your phone or on whatever and print them like out of an Instax camera, which is super fun. It just takes film like a instant camera would take, but you can print anything. So that, just like having the washi tape and the Instax and like, you know, keeping it kind of basic with that, but still really special, I've just been loving. So here's my Throwover. And it's mainly just sort of like an art journal for me. It's not like all my detail, all the stuff that I really need to know, I keep track of on Ravelry. This isn't really for that. It's more just like for the memories. But I have been putting the pattern, the size, the gauge, the needles I used, cast on and cast off dates, and yarn details. Here are my socks. and the Skagen Tee. I had an extra button because there were 9 in the pack and I only needed 8, so that worked out. And yeah, and then I haven't done the next will be the ranunculus, but I haven't done it yet. Yeah, so I love this. I think it is so fun. I actually like the process of putting things in it, and it's like a nice way to just sort of slow down and like instead of just speeding on to the next thing, just really celebrate and appreciate that project and the fact that I did it and everything that went into it, and just kind of pat myself on the back a little bit and like, you know, acknowledge that amount of work and that time that went into it. So that's really nice. I would love to sit here and chit chat with you and knit my cuffs that I need to knit, but this was such a full episode. I feel like it's probably running long already. So maybe we will get to chit chat next time. That would be nice. We're getting back in the in the rhythm of things. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me today. Gosh, I feel like I just ran my mouth. I didn't even like have a sip of my drink the whole time I've been here. It's crazy. I hope you enjoyed hearing me talk a bit about what I've knit in the last month. It's been so much. It's been so much for a month, and especially in summer, which is like often when people knitting kind of goes through a slump. But boy, am I on a tear. I'm loving it. We'll see see how long it lasts, but I'm loving it right now. And I hope you enjoyed seeing what I've been up to. I hope you are enjoying your makes, and leave me a comment if you're still here, if you're still listening to this, and let me know what you're working on. I'd love to hear, and I'll see you next time. Bye.